In the fast-paced world of business, finding a clear path to profitability can be a challenge. Welcome to 0 to 100 with your host, Jared Guy Randolph, seasoned business and finance expert. Tune in for actionable insights and strategies to accelerate your business success.
Hello, Accelerators. Today on 0 to 100, I'm very excited to announce our guest, Frank Mastronuzzi, who is the founding partner and CFO of Punch Financial. This guy has an incredible background. He's worked for everyone from Honey and Boulevard and Deloitte and Motorola and Match.com, just to name a few, because he has been the interim CFO for over 150 companies that have raised over $850 million in VC startup funds. Now, our conversation is going to be a little bit different than getting into the nitty-gritty of the actual financial management. We're going to go through topics such as creating reoccurring revenue, the importance of building key relationships, the importance of building an advisory board, and also the importance of making sure you have the right SOPs in place so your business can grow and it's not just you running it as an entrepreneur, as a business owner on a daily basis alone. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jared Guy Randolph. I am the founder of BoxFi. We are the nation's leading payment consultant, providing business growth solutions through payment processing. And I'm very happy to share the network that I have built over my 25-year entrepreneurial journey to help you grow your business and become more profitable. Ladies and gentlemen, let's accelerate together. Frank Mastronuzzi, thank you for joining us on 0 to 100.
Thanks for having me, Jared.
Today is going to be an interesting conversation for us because you do a lot, but it's all focused around the same thing. And before we kind of dive into the technical aspects of financial management of your company, let's talk a little bit about your background and how you have built Punch Financial into the success that it is today.
Good question. I did take a traditional approach. I started off with Deloitte, working in Deloitte audit in New York and Chicago. I had financial services, I had insurance, I had manufacturing. So I had clients like Merrill Lynch, Church & Dwight, which is Arm & Hammer brand. I had Princeton University. I had CNA Insurance. I had Discover Card as a client. So I had a good breadth during my tenure in public accounting. I actually did 3 IPOs, so I really got a full breadth in a short tenure, because then I followed one of my senior directors to Motorola internal audit, which is where I fell in love with technology, Jared, and got a good taste of how technology runs globally. And so I knew I wanted entrepreneurship and tech, and so I decided to go to I applied to a bunch of schools, but I wanted one that had a decent life outside of college university. So I went to University of Texas at Austin during the wonderful Ricky Williams year. So we had some amazing football seasons. And after graduating, we had won the Moot Corp competition, but that in 2000, the first bubble burst. So I then scrambled for a job while everyone was around caravanning around Europe with their bonuses that they hadn't received. And their offers that came back when they came back were rescinded. I had a jump on them, and I ended up at a little known startup in Dallas called Match.com. And online dating, couldn't understand, but I liked the CEO and the current CEO, and I liked the team and my boss. Never had an offer made on the spot, and they accepted. And that was a great run. I learned a lot by doing partnership deals and distribution deals with AOL, MSN, Yahoo. We did a dating TV show by Fremantle that only made one season. It was American Idol for dating. And so Barry Diller finally got his hands on us. IAC was formed. That's when I came to LA. And then after the success of Match, I kept getting requests through Summit Series folks. I started going on the boat for Summit at sea, and people kept asking me over and over to help them with their startup, and I kept saying no, I have a day job. And so Punch started as a side hustle. It literally started as a side hustle. And so we were very selective because I didn't have time. So I wanted to only pick and choose the people that I thought had viability and a chance. And that's kind
Yeah.
of carried through to Punch.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, we had so many clients that I couldn't keep up with it. And so I made the jump over to full time. And now we're in our 10th year this May. And it's been quite a wild ride because we've been with some amazing companies.
Wow. Okay, so this is going to give us a lot to discuss today. It's not going to be enough to cover in 45 minutes, but we are going to do our best. And this is something we will edit out. But were you at Motorola when Ed Breen was there?
Yeah.
Okay. Ed Breen is one of my very close friends' fathers. I grew up with his son, Matt. And Jeff Rosenthal's a really good buddy of mine. So it's
Calvin's brothers wrote my letter recommendation, but for business school. Chris.
Oh, wow. That's
small world.
Small world. We're connecting the dots. All right, so let's get back to it. Okay, so you have a lot of experience with major companies. Now you work with companies that are startups, but also, I believe, existing companies. And you've worked with over 150 of them. You've helped secure over $850 million in venture funding. Talk to me about when a business should be seeking venture funding and what the criteria is for growth when a venture funding group is looking at investing.
Yeah, good question. I tell people this all the time. Not every startup and not every organization should go after venture funding. It's kind of like the advice I got from my MBA, right? If you're going to go after MBA, what do you want to accomplish with it afterwards, right? And what do you need that MBA to accomplish that, right? So the same thing I say with startups. With venture, venture is a double-edged sword, right? Because once you have raised venture, then you have a whole set of going public. You have a whole set of investors that are, have a microscope, that are watching your move. They're on a timeline, right? They want to exit their funds. And so there's a whole set of pressure. So what I tell startups is really, truly not plan their next raise if they're going to do a startup venture funding, but you should always plan your next two, right? So you should think your way through not only your seed investment, but your A and B, because if you're going to go, then you need to go all in, right? So with venture, the goalposts keep moving, as you can tell with what's going on in the marketplace. At the end of the day, I kind of take some advice from my old boss at Match, which was, if you have good unit economics and the financials, if you strip off the title of the company and the financials look good, you'll never have a hard time raising money. Right. What some founders get lulled into from some of the media is, they feel like it's Oprah, on Christmas, like you get a car and you get a car when they walk down Sand Hill Road. And that's not how it works. You have to build a relationship. You have to convince them that you're moving the ball forward, that they can trust you. And you have to start building those relationships prior to when you need the fundraise. It's rare that, you can knock on someone's door, get an introduction, raise money. I always tell people, start building those relationships and showing these investors that you can perform and that you're the right team. Because raising venture, has gotten more difficult because now they're looking for, in the past it was grow at all costs, top line, right? And we'll figure out how to make profit later. And now you're seeing the likes of, Facebook was successful at converting, but Uber is still trying to figure it out. You have a lot of people still trying to figure out profitability. I think if you start building something and have a clear plan to profitability and gross margin, and I'm a big focus on gross margin, then going to venture is very clear. Go to them with, hey, here's what we've accomplished with what we were provided, family, friends round, a seed round. Here's what we were able to accomplish. Impressive. With this round, 5 million, this will get us to this milestone, in my opinion, and always give yourself a little buffer because it never goes according to plan, and show them that you can deliver on those milestones, right? And manage, which is what we spend a lot of our time in, manage those funds in the time and the runway that you set. So if you say 24 months, make sure that money lasts 24 months and don't overburn. And we see that all the time. And so then, if you miss your very first milestone coming out of seed or A, it's going to be really hard to convince someone else to give you more money, right? Um,
So I want to stay on that topic of convincing someone else to give you more money and separating the grow at all costs, but actually grow efficiently as the market's looking at today. How does a business owner set the right growth goals and in tandem still manage the funds that they have in the bank efficiently so they are not overspending?
Very good question. It's a tricky balance, right? And so what I always tell folks, and I see this mistake all the time, is they tap into one stream of revenue and they keep digging until the oil or to the well is dry, and then they start looking for second and third paths for revenue. I think you should be testing all the time different paths of tractions. And so that's where B2C and B2B came from and all these things, right? Because you don't want to put your eggs in all in one basket. And an investor doesn't want to see that where you're so heavily invested in one channel. At the early stages, you should be testing different channels and find out where you can get some traction and show that you can get customers from referral partners, from affiliate program, from LCM, right? Show them that you can do those in different and those different channels exist, because then when you go to them and say, give me more gas so I can step on the pedal, it makes sense. You've already shown that you can convert from those channels. I'm always fearful when I see one channel and they keep drilling and drilling and drilling until they run out of oil. And then by that time, they get panicked and start overspending and throwing spaghetti at the wall to try to find a new source of traffic to keep growing. And you can't. I always reference you ever watch the plate spinner, the guy that spins the plates, right?
Yeah.
You can't let the first plate stop spinning because it'll fall, right? So you got to go back and spin that, right? And so I always use that analogy, but I don't think you should have 7 or 8 plates spinning at first, but you should have at least 4, right? And obviously you put more money in the one that's delivering right now so that you can keep your trajectory, but you should manage your own growth. And anyone telling you need 300, 200% growth, well, you need to grow. At the end of the day, like I said, if the unit economics in the channel that you're driving traffic is profitable, no one's going to ever say no to that, right?
The plate spinner analogy I actually think is really awesome. And I'm thinking of it in a different way, because I've actually used it in a LinkedIn post that I did a couple of months ago. And it was talking about follow that one plate, spin the one plate. But actually what you just said is still spin the one plate, but what else can you put on that plate? So you touched on partnership, distribution, building relationships, and then you said something really key: referrals and affiliate programs. Can any business owner do that? Because it's technically not spinning a new plate. It's adding more to that plate that's going to help your business grow, because it's still the same business. You're just getting a new stream of income.
Yeah, but it's a different animal and you have different nurturing requirements, right? So
elaborate. I love this.
Right. So, with Match, if we didn't have those partnerships from MSN and AOL, Match would have never became Match, because the B2C customer acquisition path, which is why VCs don't like dating, it's too expensive. All the money's going to Facebook and Google and TikTok and all those channels. What made Match blow up was when we integrated, and we took some risk because we gave them minimum guarantees. And we said, okay, put a dating channel on MSN's portal. But then we had a partnership management team that was underneath me that said, okay, let's do a sweepstakes with our partners in Hollywood and rom-com movies, right? Win a date to, we did it with the Dallas Mavs. Win a date to Dallas Mavs. We did it with Major League Baseball. We'll win a date because baseball, you can talk while things are happening. It's slow paced enough. So, we worked with our partners Valentine's Day. We created content. We created sweepstakes. We said, hey, what are your problems you're trying to solve? And then we helped them accomplish that, because then we would get more traffic out of them. And it was a win-win. So to me, it's the 80-20 rule too. Even in this business for Punch, 20% of our partnerships give us 80% of the referrals. And so you bet your ass I'm going to spend time taking those 20% to dinner, calling, checking on them, asking what they can do to help if they want me to speak. whatever it is. So, and it's a good precursor to building relationships with VCs too. If you start nurturing those relationships, they will start paying off in spades, right?
I actually saw one of the merchants that I worked with for many years owned about 25 pizza shops, big company. They were doing really well. But their biggest growth wasn't actually through the physical pizza shops. And this is just kind of like a B2C, or actually I guess it would be a B2B partnership that they did that I think is important because our audience of entrepreneurs and business owners are always looking for ways to level up their game. What this pizza company did is they did partnerships with party planners, schools, construction companies, and little leagues within like the regions
Oh,
that they were in, and they freaking murdered the game. And they were selling their pizzas at volume at a discount, but it's like the construction company, they had their guys doing Pizza Fridays. And for the workers, they would buy pizza for them. And their revenue, their margin grew substantially because they were also booking those sales ahead of time because they knew that they had a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month plan where they knew for the Little League every Saturday they were selling pizzas to them over the course of that summer. So the partnerships, I think what you said, a lot of them think of them on a big scale, even on a smaller scale. Now, I mean, this was a company who was doing, almost $60 million a year. So they weren't a small company. But if you think about it, not only on the big scale, the small scale, there's ways to form partnerships for any type of business that you have. And those relationships really can take you to the next level.
Yeah, in that instance, that's a brilliant idea because I think about it. Because what happens to the individual construction worker that eats that pizza? Then all of a sudden, when he goes home to his family, who's he going to recommend? Right? This pizza's good, right? And it's not expensive, right? So, two things for Match, it was critical because we were still at the early days. People thought online dating was risky. We needed the validation by being integrated in MSN and AOL and all those other companies. It gave a second form of validation that this is safe, right? And so it helped us in a lot of ways on the PR side. So that's one. But the recurring revenue is king in any business, right? And so what you just mentioned about the pizza place and Match, by getting a B2C is tough because you have to keep paying to get that new customer. But the B2B, that construction company, the Little League, they kept buying. You didn't have to resell them, right? And so your customer acquisition costs over time on that customer go down dramatically because they keep buying if you look at volume. And for us, it was, it's critical. So I like to see that when I work with startups, honestly, Jared, because it's looking that even that pizza guy's thinking outside the box because most pizza companies aren't, right? No pun intended, but it literally was, hey, and I'll take a recurring revenue business any day, right? In fact, our financials, we break it out all the time. What's one-time revenue and what's recurring? Because investors want to see recurring revenue. And so how do you get recurring revenue in any business is important, right? Right. And that's why people love B2B SaaS because it's hard once you have that customer usually stays. The LTV on that customer is longer. And so when you have high churn, it's a tough business because you're on a hamster wheel. You got to keep selling, right?
So when you're from a venture standpoint, when you're looking at that business that has that reoccurring revenue, how does that increase their market value or their multiple versus a company that's really one-off sales? They might still be VC, they might still be growing, but they're having to do one sale at a time technically.
It's infinitely more valuable because the customer acquisition is already, if they acquire a recurring revenue, it's already, you don't have to keep fueling the flames, right? The flames are there and you just have to nurture the relationship. So then you need someone that's going to reach out to those partners and say, hey, we're doing a promotion. Hey, we're doing right. Hey, here's a holiday gift for your company. Thanks for being such a good customer. And then it turns into a CRM type of project, right? Because, staying top of mind is important so that when they do it, right? And we at Match One, as far as coming up with ideas to help them stimulate their clients too, right? And giving them the tools. So when you build a program, give them the marketing materials that they can use. Give them the content for special. For Match, we did dating that relate to Valentine's Day, then Halloween, and hey, don't be lonely. Don't go to Thanksgiving dinner by yourself with the family this year, right? Like we would use ideas to help our partners drive more traffic. And then we would show them that that was working, right? And they were deriving more revenue. And again, a recurring revenue referral fee becomes an annuity. So they get addicted to it too, right? So all of a sudden it's like, hey, why not? Right. So it's a real smart way. It takes energy and it takes consistent reaching out. You can't reach out it's like anyone. You can't reach out a year later and be like, hey, how's it going? Where have you been for a year? Right. So if you're going to do it, you have to commit to staying on top of it. And we do that at Punch, where I check in with our partners once a quarter automatically through CRM. And I'm always like, hey, do you want to jump on a call? And then if I'm going to that city, I plan a night at one bar or restaurant and say, hey, everyone stop by if you can, right? Just staying top of mind is important.
So talk to me about some other creative ways. I actually love the idea of your key partners when you're traveling, especially for you, because you travel a lot, being in a city and that, you set up shop in a bar one night and you invite people to come stop by and have a drink because they also start to network with each other as well. What are some other creative ways that business owners can create that connectivity, stay in the front of their key relationships? Because as you and I know, these type of things and activities build your business. And it's sometimes might seem like it's a lot of extra work for entrepreneurs to get out there and do that. But those are the things that you can do, which can really take your business to the next level. Are there other ways that you would suggest business owners look at doing relationship building as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like to cross pollinate not only existing clients, but prospects, because the best way to sell a prospect is have them talk to an existing customer that's really happy. And so when we do roundtable dinners or events, I never end up having to sell the prospects because they see how happy the other customers are. And it's human nature, right? So if they're like, oh my God, Punch is great and Frank is great, I don't need to do my own horn. They're doing it for me. And so I really like to cross pollinate between existing and potential, because then it also, like you said, putting them in the same room, they start seeing who you're working with. They realize that there's value add there. They might have met one or two people that they're going to stay in touch with now, and you get that positive goodwill by doing it. And so it becomes it's a pay it forward type of thing that in the long run, it pays off in your career. And, one of my friends here in LA, Keith Ferrazzi, who's a, famous author, will say this all the time, right? If you're building those relationships over time and they like you and they like doing business, then it's easy for them and you to continue making that relationship become positive ROI over time, because once you have someone in your corner, they could also be a referral, right? If someone's questioning. And he would do that with Arianna Huffington in the early days. He wrote the book, Never Eat Alone, and they would anchor their dinners with one of their clients. And then they'd say, hey, so-and-so's coming, you should really come. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, I want to go because, whoever's going to be there, Ariana Grande, I'll just throw that out, right? Like, and not that level, but it was always someone in the business community, right? So, or a hot startup, and people of other hot startup, the founders, there's the big misnomer. Not all founders know each other, right? So when you're like, hey, the founder of, right now, Vappy AI, one of our hot startups, if I were to say Vappy was coming and the founders are coming, I'd be able to pull in a ton of people because they're all over the press right now, right? So that's what you kind of do. And so you want to be surrounded by winners, right? They talk about sports, like you want to surround yourself by winners so that you raise your game and your level. Same thing, right? And it takes time to build that, but by building those relationships, following up, building human, long-standing relationships, call them on their birthday, do those things that people aren't doing, it pays off in the long run, right?
I love the idea of the comment that you just made about building human relationships, because that human capital, that relationship capital is tantamount to success. And it's something I've been doing for years. And you and I have had this discussion, which we'll follow up about how magnificent the dinner was. Before I lose my thought, Never Eat Alone. Did Arianna Huffington write that?
No, Keith Ferrazzi did.
Keith Ferrazzi. Okay. Just writing that down. And for the audience, Keith Ferrazzi, never eat alone. I'm all about the building of the relationships. Another kind of idea to throw in there is if you are a business owner, and I actually now understand with one of my other clients, which was they owned like 8 lumber yards, and they would do dinners, but they would do dinners with potential partners in the communities in which they had the lumber yards, whether it was the heads of construction companies, it was the heads of distributors and suppliers, et cetera. They would do, it might be like cigar and steak, something like that, or like a Scotch night, but they would take their network and introduce each other. So it might not have necessarily been for a client, but it could have been for that potential partner or distributor. And this is a little bit different than the conversations we typically have. But the reason we're having this conversation today is because in 2025, we have to think about ways to grow our business. And the ways you grow your business is by buying favor with your network of influencers. They drive more people, drive more traffic, which drives more revenue. So get creative about the way in which you connect with your customers and your community.
And those that will produce recurring, right? Because I think we've gotten too far into, with COVID and everything, we've gotten too far into it being everything's transactional, right?
Right.
And no one's taken the time. That's why people say, write a thank you card physically now, because no one's doing that anymore, right? It's the same kind of thing. I think in building relationships, I never drive anywhere now, especially with LA being traffic, where I'm not calling a partner or someone just saying, hey, I'm checking in, even if I don't talk to them, by leaving a voicemail saying, hey, I was thinking of you,
Right.
wanted to check in, let's catch up. That's it. The fact that I just merely thought of them in this day and age where I'm consistently checking in with people, and I cheat, I use a CRM that's like, hey, you haven't talked to so-and-so with Jared in 2 months, like time to ping. Hey, we're human, right? But it's important. It really is. And so these founders, and it's again, the media that's full. TechCrunch makes it seem like you can run down Sand Hill Road and be like, here's a check. Nice to meet you. Here's your check. Nice to meet you. Here's your check. That doesn't happen. You have to build a relationship and show them that you can deliver, and show them that you're surrounded yourself by a good team, right? That's what they talk about, team. And that's how you do that. So you build that relationship over time. You don't just, I always tell them, if you need money from them in the next 6 months, you waited too long. You should have started building. I like recommending, hey, reach out and saying, hey, I want to let you know what we're up to. We're not raising money right now, right? I just want to get your thoughts. And, the old adage is really true. If you ask for money, you get advice. And if you ask for advice, you get money, because you're coming in under the pretense of you want them to take a look at stuff. They start asking questions. I always tell people, I've had founders too, don't make the mistake of, I got to get through my whole deck. Like, I'm going to make them read every slide. The more they're engaged in asking questions means they're interested, and let them lead the conversation then, right? Don't interrupt, because then they're going to start thinking. You want them to start problem solving for you. Have you thought about this? Have you talked to so-and-so? Oh, I tried to get in there. I don't know anyone at Motorola, right? Do you know someone that can help me? And 9 times out of 10, when you put it that specific, they're like, of course, I know so-and-so. 1 second, boom, done. And now you're in, because you got in by someone very important. And I always say this too, and all my startups, shoot for the stars on advisor board, because they were once a founder too. And the fact that you're reaching out, and if you can convince them, that's when you get the momentum, right? So, they're like, well, I'm not ready for, I'm like, that's when you reach out, but do your homework, find out something that, like you and I keep finding overlapping concentric circles, right?
Crazy.
That's what they need to do. And when I get an email on LinkedIn that's like, hey, I saw that you went to University of Texas and you worked at Match, and it shows me that they did some homework, I am 99% more likely to respond to them, even if it's a nice, polite no, than if it was some AI generated, which you can tell, right? So my thing is, don't be lazy. You're better off reaching out to 10 people with thoughtful questions and, hey, I want your specific help on how to sustain a subscription business over time. How did you do that? Like that, those are things that are going to get my attention and show me that they did some homework, because it's unfortunate, but again, the world is too transactional at this point. And so I don't have time for transactional folks, because I like to do business with folks that then in turn I can, spend money with them too.
Right.
All of our partners will tell you, I don't like sending business to one. We send a lot of referrals, but I'll tell you that if a partner doesn't even attempt to send a referral back or co-host a dinner with us or do a webinar with us, if there's not a two-way street, those relationships end fast. And so, because I've learned that if you have a two-way street and they're truly a partner, then that's what's built our business. And we haven't spent a lot of marketing budget in building Punch. I've spent a lot of time in building relationships, which, by the way, whether they bring me business or not, I'm making great relationships regardless. I'm still rich in both senses of the word, meaning I'm rich in partnerships and in relationships, but I'm also just got the phone with bakers that have now become personal friends, and we're going on holiday together, right? Like, so my point is, that's what the younger founders need to understand, because they get really kind of laser focused on, I need 100K in MRR to raise a $10 million Series A. And that's all they stay focused on. And you're not enjoying the journey. And two, people see that, and no one wants to do business with people like that. They want it to be, as an investor, I want to go along for the ride. I want to enjoy it.
Right. Well, that's actually very good advice for anyone who is in business, whether you're a startup or existing, because people get stuck in their lane and they're doing the technical tasks that they do on a daily basis, and they forget what the true idea behind being an entrepreneur is, which is connecting the dots. And, audience, this is absolutely not the conversation that I was expecting to have, but it is an incredibly important conversation. It's actually the only time we've really kind of dived into the importance of relationships, and it's relationships to genuinely build them, but how you actually monetize them for your business. And you said something really important, and it's actually something that has propelled my business and my career, and that's the board. And I don't care whether you're that pizza shop with the 25 locations or the lumber yard or a business like mine or yours. I have an advisory board, 7 key people. That one was the chief of staff for a senator. There was one who was the chief creative officer for one of the largest real estate and product companies in the world. There's one that is a major figure in AI, et cetera, et cetera. The reason I put that board together is because I get value out of learning from them. They have an incredible network, which helps me build my business. They have an equity share within the company, so they're actually vested in giving me their time and access to resources. And it's an easier way through the door and to build trust immediately with key relationships. What advice would you give a business owner, whether they're a startup business owner or an existing business owner, on how to build out a board that can help you grow your business?
So, Jared, I was going to ask you a question back, which was, how scared were you to ask each one of those to be an advisor?
There was some trepidation there. Yeah. I had my come to Jesus moment. I'm like, wait, all they would do is just say no. But I'll tell you what's so funny. I had relationships with all of them. So what I realized is, and
it wasn't at this level, right? You had to build it, and you had to show them that you wanted. Yeah. Right. Every advisor, even any mentor, wants to help, but they want to know that the time they're going to spend is well spent, right? So, and that's what you have to demonstrate to answer your question. And I tell my founders all the time, if you're not afraid to ask them to be an advisor, then they're probably not. You're not shooting high enough, right? You should be afraid of them saying no. And the worst thing they can do is say no, right? Right. But what you do again, everyone has been in there. All of us have been in your shoes, right, Jared? And so when someone reaches out and says, "Hey, I just want your advice on this. Can you help me?" Sure. And I'm going to see again. It's like she's famous from doing the relationship webinars at Summit. I'm blanking on her name, Esther Perel. And so she's like, you wouldn't show up to a board meeting unprepared. But yet this was because founders were losing their personal relationships. And she'd say, but then you show up to date night with your girlfriend completely unprepared. Like, so why would you think that relationship's going to last? Because you show up and you're not present. And it's the same thing, right? So come prepared in your personal relationship. The same with these advisors. Come to them and find out exactly. I want you to share how you, like you asked, how did you get where you got? Everyone wants to tell their story. Everyone likes to talk about themselves, but they want to make sure that if I'm going to spend the time, that nurturing that relationship or that mentee is going to turn into something, right?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
And that's also the true fruitfulness of what I get when I mentor, right? I just had a 500 startup company that I had really beat up on over their time and to refine their model. And then last December, it was the 500 startup Christmas party. And there was this founder saying he had just closed a huge round, and everything I had pushed him towards, like, to have it come full circle and for him to thank me and say, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have gone on this path in the tough love. And not, I was happy about that. He was happy about that. And we've stayed friends, right? And a lot of our clients that go on to success stay friends because no one forgets that when you're in the trenches that you were there for them, right? When they were doing that. So I always tell people, spend the time in building your advisory board. It's just as important because it's going to show the investors that you could build relationships with the board members, and that's going to be just as critical.
Right. One of the things that you mentioned about the question you posed, how nervous were you to ask them? So a book I read recently called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and I actually think Bezos did a quote for her on the front of the book, if I remember correctly. I've got it downstairs, not in front of me. And she talks about the concept of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is actually something to be embraced because that means you're always pushing yourself beyond your limit. And some people who are the most successful suffer from what they call imposter syndrome, but it's not something you should look at as a negative thing. It's something that you look at that you're pushing your envelope to advance in your career continually. And that type of growth leads to massive success. And when you go outside your comfort zone to make that ask of someone, you'd be like, oh, they would never advise me or they would never mentor me. Here's one thing that I have found. Some of the most successful people out there have said this to me. Very few people come to them and ask them for their insights and guidance. And that's one thing that kind of blew my mind because people are intimidated. So put that list of people, whether they're in your community, they're in your network, whomever you think you can add value to, and they can add value to what you're doing, and have a conversation with them. All they can do.
Why? When people show me why they're reaching out to me on their homework,
well,
you've lived this, you did this, you worked with so that to me again shows me that they spent some time. So it's really important. And this lesson we're talking about does spill over to partnerships, does spill over to building, because at some point I tell my founders, at the early stage, you get hell bent on focused on product and sales. That's it.
Right.
And fundraising.
Right.
At some point, and you hire all the best you can, like us outside of that. You hire the best accountants, the best customer acquisition, the best lawyers, until you can bring them in-house. But at some point, the role has to switch. If you're going to switch from founder to being a successful founder of a fast startup, you have to switch to becoming an ambassador, meaning you still have to recruit the best talent in-house. And then you need to make sure that you're giving them what they need to be successful, the CMO, the CTO. And so at some point, you're no longer doing the work, you're guiding, encouraging, and helping remove roadblocks for them, right? And that's a successful founder that transitions from doing everything to becoming a true CEO. And a lot of times those founders can't make that, or in any, it doesn't have to be a tech startup, but any company. At some point, you have to build trust with the people. And I just saw this on LinkedIn, and it's going around right now. It's like having a job is not satisfaction enough. It's being seen and being cared for at that job. The job fruitful, the same thing, right? They want to know that their opinion and their input is there, and you're nurturing them, and that's what their role has to be. And they have to switch, and it's hard to make that switch, and not everyone's good at that. And at the end of the day, you have to at some point become that ambassador where you're like, hey, how can I help you, Jared, accomplish what you need to, which is 2x revenue this next year, right? What can we do? What do you need? And check in from time to regular basis and give them downs, right?
We had a great guest on, Dr. Kent Wessinger, and we had a conversation. He's like the foremost authority in millennial and Gen X, Gen Z, millennial and Gen Z workforce mentality, retention, etc. And it was a really cool conversation because he talked about how much they actually care and they do want their voice heard. They want to be held accountable, but they also want to have leaders around them who are willing to be held accountable as well. And that should be full vertical of the business. When you are running a business that you're seeing growth in, how, because I want to stay on the concept around team and culture. Who are some of your key hires once you get beyond you building a successful company or whatever it may be as a CEO? Who are some of the key hires that you should bring in that really can help take your business to the next level?
Absolutely, hands down, it's operations and COO or some form of operations, because what happens over time I see is that if there's not structure, just like you look at any, you talk to kids that were in the system of not having parents, right? And what they'll say is all the homes that they were in that they had structure felt like they were loved more because there was structure and framework for them to succeed. They knew what was good and what was bad and what would make them successful and what would not make them successful. And the same I see with a lot of startups. They don't put in operating procedures because people, I always believe in people want to do the right thing. There's always the exception, but for the most part, most people want to do the right thing, but they have to know what that is, right? So if you don't tell them what the right thing is to do in this situation, then when they do something wrong, how can you hold them accountable, right? So right. What you need to do is figure out what the process is and what's successful. And then what we tend to do is we always go after when things go wrong. Okay, let's put a procedure and let's communicate it to the staff that this is how. A good example early days is always travel and expense management on credit cards. Like you can't fly first class, right? Right. You can't do, right. So and there's now technology that will help you manage that, but you should document it so that also people know what they're being held accountable for. And I think ops is important. It doesn't have to be a COO per se. And I kind of think it's also the HR person. There's a little bit of overlap because someone needs to write the procedure and figure out the process. The other person needs to document and communicate it to the employees, right? In a positive way. And positive reinforcement works, right? And people tend to go to negative reinforcement right away, but positive reinforcement works well. And I think when you launch something with positive reinforcement, like, hey, the first person to if you turn in all 12 expense statements on time this year, you will get put into a raffle for blah, except, right? Love that. Enforcement, right? Instead of if you don't turn in your expense statement, we're gonna write you up and you're gonna put you in your that. But if you have it as a positive reinforcement, and that's where people kind of go wrong early on because they get frustrated and they're stretched thin. And I always say, find a good ops person. It doesn't have to be a COO. It has to be someone that's really attention to detail, specifics. And if you're channeling into any different territory, we always say, okay, what's the process? Who do they reach? Who do they write out to? What's the form? What's the process? Who approves it? Is it Slack? Right. And you document it so that every new person that comes in next gets that handbook that is continuously built on, right? In 8 different categories, but you kind of know what they're going to be up front, but you start building them.
So unfortunately, we're almost at the end of our session, which is driving me nuts because I have literally 6 more questions I've written down that I want to ask you. So that means you do have to come back, and this might be like a regular quarterly thing. So you keep giving sage advice and wisdom. So one last question before we get into the rapid fire section. You've worked with some other very high profile startups like Honey and Boulevard. What are some of the lessons that you have taken away from helping build those companies that any business owner, no matter where they are in their business today, can use to create more growth?
Good question. In those instances, I think two things always held true. You say seven habits of highly effective people. I started building my habits of highly effective entrepreneurs. There's a few that I keep seeing people make mistakes on. One, when they advocate the responsibility of finances, I get most founders don't like accounting and finance. It's not their strength, but you got to know your business. And if you don't know your levers and you don't know your financials, then you might as well, you're not flying the plane, then someone else is. And so that's one. And two, the adage of hire slowly, fire fast. I see this all the time. People end up hiring their friends, their classmates, their whatever it is. And then, it doesn't work out because, they're a great drinking buddy or they're a great whatever, squash player, whatever it is, but it doesn't always translate. My thing is hire people that are qualified that really, really want to be there because you've known them and they're good people, because it doesn't always translate. And hiring tends to fall to at the end of the day when I got everything else done, then I'll start looking at, and I think the founders of Honey and Boulevard at the beginning really spent a lot of time of interviewing and hiring every employee in the early days. Because if you're growing, one of the biggest mistakes most companies do is they hire too fast and then there's no procedures. People are wasting time. They don't know what they need to be doing. If you're hiring as you absolutely need people because the other folks are too strapped and can't get to everything, and you're giving them clear, here's your job responsibilities, here's what we need daily, weekly, monthly, and you're hiring as needed because clients are being added instead of, hey, we just raised 10 million, let's hire a bunch of people. I see that all the time. No, what are they doing? Why do you need them, right? Hire them after you bring in the business. And so I think those top two for me, Honey and Boulevard both acted like they always had $5 in the bank with every financial decision. They didn't act like they had millions of dollars, which they did. They acted like they had thousands, and so they made very strategic, smart decisions every time. And when you heard, oh well, we have the money, what's the big deal? No, because we may not always have it, right? And the people that act that way are struggling right now.
Very true.
Two, hiring. Everyone says it, but I've seen it too many times, and 9 times out of 10, the HR problems that exist in early startups are always, oh, it was my buddy in the fraternity. I've seen it too many times. It's always like, oh, they were my best friend growing up.
Right.
Now they're suing you. So good luck. Right. So, really hire for expert. Right. And I always like to hire, Jared, I talk about this, hire based on want and drive. I'll always take someone that is lower level, that's showing initiative and drive and want, versus someone that's done it and kind of bored.
Right. Gotcha. I love that. All right, my friend, you ready for the rapid fire section?
Yes.
All right, give me quick answers on this. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Is there a phrase that you think about often in business?
Don't put off today what you don't put off till tomorrow. What's something you could do today?
Love it. If you had the chance to have dinner with someone tonight, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, shit. That's a tough question. I would say Leah Iacocca.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So give me 3 money-saving techniques that any business owner out there can employ in 2025.
I would say one is constantly reevaluate every spend every month and ask yourself, do we really need this? I see all the time when I challenge them, and it's like, hey, do we need 5 seats for this? Yeah, can you use one login? So I always constantly saying, look at every expense and ask yourself, do we absolutely need this? Can we get by without it? 2, you're saying finance techniques. I would always constantly be managing budgeting. People don't budget and manage to budget, and I'm big on variance versus budget. So QuickBooks allows for budgeting. Most people that use QuickBooks don't ever touch budgeting, even if you just set last year's numbers as a budget and looked at it. Because if you wait too late, you have to constantly, what I always use the analogy of expense management and budget management is the Titanic. The Titanic tried to turn so fast once they realized they were so close to the iceberg that there was no chance in hell for them to turn. So they hit the iceberg. But if they were constantly moving, right, then when they realized the iceberg was there, they wouldn't have had to move much. So what I tell people is constantly be reviewing your financials on a regular basis. Don't wait quarterly, do it monthly, and make small pivots and adjustments. Because if you wait till the quarter or year end, it's too late. It's already too late. The boat's taking on water.
Awesome.
And then the third is, again, back to always act like you only have $5 in the bank. If you are managing your finances as if you don't know where you're going to get your next meal from, those frugal, thrifty, savvy, founders always succeed because they're not caught without money, right? So I'll use the perfect analysis. Like, how the hell did Bench just shut their doors? They're an accounting firm, right?
Right.
How do they know that that's a good example of how do you just shut your doors with it, no notice to your clients? You had to know, and you had to be communicating. So that's a good example of don't run your business that way.
I think that's going to be the name of your book. Act like you have $5 in the bank. That sounds like a fun one. All right, last question, but not least. What is the one obstacle that you had to overcome personally to build the success that you have built today?
Not give a shit what everyone else thought. It constantly goes back to the imposter syndrome, Jared. I was always worried about what are they thinking? Did I say the wrong thing? And I always second guess myself. And then I realized, okay, if you deliver, full circle, if you're a good person, you're building relationships, I admit when I make mistakes, I'm human, everyone can empathize. Once I started realizing and stopped apologizing for who I was, but just did the best job I could, that's when my career took off. Because I was always worried about, do I have an Ivy League? I don't have an Ivy League education. How am I in this room with all these other people? Like, again, the imposter syndrome creeps in. But if you do good work, no one cares at the end of the day. They always say people remember how you make them feel. The same thing in business. People remember how you make them feel and how you performed. And if you performed, because I forget some of my clients and they come back. I just ran into another one super successful, and he was like, you taught me so many things that I still preach to my team this day. Like, you forget, right? So those are the things. That's what I would say.
Beautiful. Frank, please tell everyone where they can connect with you if they would like to do so.
Sure. My email is frank@punchfinancial.com. You could reach out to me there or on Insta, Punch Financial, Twitter, same thing, or you can come to our website and contact us or info@punchfinancial. Those are the easiest ways. And I'm active on LinkedIn, so reach out to me there.
Awesome. Frank Mastronuzzi, thank you so much for joining us on 0 to 100.
Thanks, Jared. Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning in to 0 to 100 podcast. We hope you feel inspired and ready to accelerate your business. Remember, your journey to success starts with a single step. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving for greatness. For more resources and show notes, visit jaredguyrandolph.com. We'll see you next time.